Hi there, welcome to the Our Daily Bread Step Study. I am an anonymous alcoholic. I've been sober nearly 15 years. I've been continuously sober and I haven't had any pills, pot, booze, or anything that affects me from the neck up. This is my journey through the steps, and what I'd like to do is try to help some other people also work the steps. Alright, let's see if I can. Alright, so this is a series, like I said, that's designed to help you work the steps in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've worked them this way, and my goal is to find some other new alcoholics or some people who've been around for a while that want to try it this way, and to help them work the steps. This is not the only way. It is just a way that has worked for me. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, we share our experience, strength, and hope. And this is my experience, and I hope that it can help you. The main principle of Alcoholics Anonymous, as you may know, or if you're new, maybe you don't know, is that of one alcoholic talking to another. And so that's what makes it an experience-based program, because people have always told me throughout my life kind of things that I might do, but it wasn't until I believed that someone knew where I had been and knew how I felt that I could, and also that I had reached a point of desperation that I could really begin to hear somebody and start to take some actions. This one alcoholic talking to another, this helped reduce our feelings of difference enough to try the program. And I knew all throughout my life I'd always felt different, and that didn't change when I came to AA. In fact, I was one of these that I knew that I drank like an alcoholic, and I knew that I did things that seemed like what an alcoholic would do, but I knew that I also had I felt like I had some additional problems that you guys didn't have when I got sober. I learned differently later on. So the program of recovery is passed by word of mouth from one member to another. It's been this way since 1935. People don't typically, it's difficult to, you cannot do the program by yourself. The reason is because the problem of alcoholism centers in our minds. So that means when I read a sentence from the big book, my brain may not interpret it correctly, and I may not follow the instructions or get the meaning that I need in order to recover. So that being said, while we do use the literature and we do use meetings as tools, we definitely need a third party, usually called a sponsor, to help interpret what's been written in the literature and what's being passed on. The way the program works is that it doesn't make sense until after you've done it, and you really can't understand the 12 steps until after you've done them. And that's why it's an experience-based program. There's a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous who have been to Alcoholics Anonymous for a long time, and they can share a lot about the theory or philosophy, but they don't have their own experiences, and you can tell the difference. So just keep that in mind. Most of everything you're asked to do in Alcoholics Anonymous won't make sense until after you've done it. It's very strange, I know. But it works. Okay, so there are 5 suggestions that we give to newcomers. And I put here in quotations, the actions here do not care who is taking them or why, they just work. That was very important for me to hear when I was new, and even today, is that it doesn't matter who's taking the actions in Alcoholics Anonymous, we're going to get the results. There's no mystery, there's no magical fairy dust that they sprinkle in the meetings. It's just some actions that we take, and then we get results. So the 5 suggestions are: in the morning, pray on our knees, ask a higher power to keep us sober. You don't have to believe in anything. Lots of people say they pray to the mattress. To me, I was just superstitious and desperate, so I was afraid that if I didn't do it, I wouldn't stay sober, so I just did it. and then at night I thanked the higher power for keeping me sober. Go to a meeting every day. So this is really important. For me, I had to make meetings the most important thing in my life. So everything else was just kind of like what I did between meetings. I got there early. I helped set up, I helped clean up, and then I stayed and I spoke with people. And if people were going out to coffee, I did that. The whole idea was to try to contribute to the meeting and be of service. Call your sponsor every day. Even if there's nothing to say, some people call this the AA fire drill, because we're practicing for when there is something to say. And there usually is something. Things you want to discuss with your sponsor are ideas that you have that you think are good, resentments, fears, hurt feelings, secrets that you may have, things you feel ashamed about, things that you feel happy about. All those kinds of things you want to discuss with your sponsor. Next thing is read 2 pages of the big book per day. Most people do like a morning quiet time, read page and do like a little prayer meditation. I was taught to read page 86 through 87 in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, along with a few daily meditation books. One of them I used was a book called Reflections, and another book called 24 Hours a Day. And those, all throughout the time I've been sober, that's been one of the most consistent things, along with meetings, was that morning quiet time. I think it really helps. And then number 5 is don't drink between meetings. It really works better if you don't do that. And then we have these other tools. If you feel like you're going to drink, or if you start thinking it's going to be a good idea, like it's a good time to call your sponsor. One of the things that's difficult to do is to differentiate when you're new between things we should act on, things we shouldn't act on. So as a rule of thumb, like I try not to listen to my head. That's how we describe that phenomenon in AA. We say, well, my head is telling me that I want to do X, Y, and Z, but I'm going to call my sponsor because what I really want to do is stay sober. Alright, so working the steps. You've got to work the steps in order, and in order to work the steps, you need to have a sponsor. The reason is, like I said before, alcoholism centers in the mind, so it's going to be impossible to work the steps alone without being able to even though we're being as honest as we can be, there's still, the alcoholism still has a layer of rationalization and delusion that we cannot see through without the help of a third party, and especially that third party has to be an alcoholic, because they can see things from the inside. So it's like looking from the inside out, that a person who may be like a concerned third party who doesn't understand alcoholism may not see it from the inside out like we can. And so it's totally different to somebody who's not an alcoholic. One of the interesting things that I found when I was reading the doctor's opinion was that, and this is how I knew that Dr. Silkworth, who wrote the doctor's opinion, was not an alcoholic. It's because he said the only relief that we have to suggest is entire abstinence. And that's how I knew that Dr. Silkworth was not an alcoholic, because for an alcoholic of my type, abstinence does not bring relief. Abstinence from alcohol does not bring relief. It brings like the opposite of that, which I solve by drinking. Okay, so we go through some more sponsor guides, another through the 12 steps, and helps them learn to be a member of a home group. The idea of a home group is pretty important, because we have to have connections with people, or I found that I have to have connections with people. I need to be a member of a group where if I usually go on Monday night and I don't go, somebody wonders where I'm at, and I do the same thing for them. And it's just a wonderful thing to feel a part of something like that. The home group I went to the meeting like every night, and you just get to know people, you get to know their names, you get to know their lives, and you invite them into your life. And what that does is it creates like this family of understanding, is what a lot of people call it. And in order to be a member of a home group, you have to know like how to. So a lot of us, myself, and for me, I didn't really know how to be a member of a group of people. I never was. I was just always like out for myself mostly, and didn't really understand how that worked. So a sponsor helps you learn to do that. Mostly it just involves being of service, and little things and big things. However, not all experience in AA is alike. So some groups, every group's autonomous. So what service and their customs and respect for Alcoholics Anonymous look like in one group may look differently in some other group. Okay, and it's kind of weird because usually we end up where we're supposed to be through no effort on our own part. So wherever you're at, make it the best place that you can and see what you can contribute. Typically, the way you want to find a sponsor, you just want to find somebody you can identify with. For the most part, men sponsor men and women sponsor women. There are a few exceptions, and these are kind of like exceptional people, and I don't really understand them, but but they seem to be successful, and there are those cases. But a lot of times, most new men in AA and new women in AA, a lot of times they're not used to having friends of the same gender. Well, some of the real severe kinds, I guess they would, I don't know if they're severe or not, but a lot of times we're not used to having friends of the same gender because of the idea that we're not used to connecting with people. We're used to like competing with people or being threatened or being afraid, and so it's not. So it's something we have to get used to. Essentially, men need to get used to being friends with men, and women really benefit from getting used to being friends with women. And so sponsorship of the same gender helps. It's useful to have a sponsor who you can identify with, who you feel knows how you feel and has been where you've been, but that's not always the case. So next thing, okay, so the first 3 steps. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, their lives become unmanageable. That's part 1. That's step 1. Notice it says we, and notice it says we were powerless over alcohol. It never mentions anything about being an alcoholic in step 1. It doesn't say that at all. And then it says that our lives have become unmanageable after that dash. So it's been taught to me, and I believe it to be true in my case, that dash is significant, and that there is a world difference between that being one sentence and having that dash, and I'll explain it later. Okay, so step 2, it says came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Notice it doesn't say God there at all, and in this step, I think really separates our program as a spiritual program rather than a religious program. And we'll talk more about it later. Step 3 made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Now, it does say God there, but then it also says, as we understood Him. So if you have a problem with God, just put that on the shelf for now, and we'll deal with it when we get there. First, we're going to do step 1. Okay, so here's an example of how to do step 1, and the way I do it, and the way I've sponsored people. They've done it this way. They're still sober. So step 1, I've already spread it, but here are some general instructions for working step 1. So first thing I'm going to do is get in your big book and read the doctor's opinion and Bill's story. Okay, as you go through reading, you're going to highlight or underline anything you can identify with. So you want to look for the similarities, not differences. If you find some similarities, you want to underline them. And if something significant to you, for whatever reason, make a little mark by it, because you're going to discuss it later. Okay, and then if there's some words you don't understand, be sure and look those up. The next thing you want to do after you have read those 2 chapters is the first thing is you're going to make a list of 10 ways you're powerless over alcohol, and then make a list of 10 ways your life is unmanageable. Sometimes that's very difficult because of the delusion and rationalization that exists in our minds. Alcoholism is such a mentally distorting disease most of the time when I sponsor people, they start to write it, they can't come up with any, and if I give them a few hints, the pen just starts flowing. Okay, so it's just a little hump you have to get over sometime. Then you're going to discuss the readings and the list with your sponsor. So on the next couple of slides, I made examples of doing step 1. So 10 ways I'm powerless over alcohol. The first list, I made a list of 10 ways I personally am powerless over alcohol. And this is like an example of like how you can go with it, although you don't have to be, you don't have to write just this, you can write whatever your experience is. So the first thing is, when I take a drink, I cannot control how much I drink afterward. That's always been true. I'm one of those alcoholics that as soon as I learned about alcohol and started to drink, I could not control it. There wasn't like a period of time where I was socially drinking. It was just like full-on alcoholic drinking right out of the gate. 2, when I drink, I never know what I will do. I also learned that right away. 3, when I stop drinking, I end up drinking again. So before I ever came to AA, I stopped drinking on my own several times. Well, at least the way I look at it now is I just like postponed drinking as long as I possibly could. But all of my sobriety had an expiration date, because the day would come when life and reality was just too much and I would have to get drunk. 4, when I drink, it makes me believe that my screwed up life is okay. So yeah, when I was finally toward the end, when I was homeless and had no job, if I wouldn't got something to drink, I got this feeling like I had it under control again. Instantly changed my perception of reality. That does not happen for people who are not alcoholics, by the way. 5, when I'm drinking, I think about when I'm not drinking, I think about when I can drink again. And this was something that did happen to me. And also it's kind of notable to point out that that this thinking about when I can drink again, like I think there's a part of my alcoholism that's always planning to get me alone, away from recovery, and so that I can drink again. And so I'm like constantly having to take these actions in AA, because there's that sort of like unconscious planning. That's for example, one day I was on my way to work in one state, in a city, in a state, and I realized I had enough money to fly to a different state, and for a reason that sounded good at the time, I did. And I had on the plane, I had planned on not drinking. When I landed, I was drunk that night, so wasn't planning on it. There it was. And I think that's like I drink even when I'm not planning to drink. Yeah, that was the same situation. I drink when I'm supposed to be somewhere important. I've had a lot of opportunities and engagements that I didn't make because I was drinking, and there were things I wanted to go to. I drink to forget things I did while drinking. Everybody knows what that's like. I will lie, cheat, or steal to be able to drink. That's the kind of person I was. If I didn't have any money or any means, then I would get it any way I could. I do incredible, tragic, and demoralizing things while drinking. And that kind of ties back into number 8, but yeah, there's the list. So that's an example, I think, of a good list. 10 ways my life is unmanageable. Now this is where I vary from some others, I think, in the program, but not from the ones who taught me how to do it. So when I make this list, I'm focusing on the ways my life is unmanageable while I'm sober. And what I do is I look at my life like before I started drinking and in those periods of sobriety prior to coming to AA, like when I decided I wanted to stop drinking, what was my sobriety like in those periods of times? How was my life unmanageable? So I'm looking at how my life is unmanageable, during sobriety. And as I look back over my life, I noticed that I've always felt different from other people and didn't feel comfortable around people. Okay. And then number 2, I always felt inadequate, and this caused me to sabotage my life. 3, I felt riddled with fear that required me to escape with alcohol and to lose sleep. 4, cannot seem to enjoy life the way others do. That's something that's always plagued me. It's like just not seeming like I didn't get the same kind of satisfactions out of going to work and being a member of a family like other people did. Cannot seem to function and live the way others do. That's another thing. Can't seem to keep a job, or I can't seem to find a partner, find a girlfriend the way other people do, etc. Cannot seem to form lasting relationships or real connections. Yeah, loneliness was a big deal. My relationships were superficial and based on mutual using each other, often suicidal, or feel that life is pointless. That would usually take a while, because when I stopped drinking, I would have that inspiration and that motivation, and then as I stayed sober, it began to feel more and more like I was going uphill, and get to the point where life just felt like, why am I even alive? I felt myself being depressed a lot and wanting to isolate. This got worse after doing some things. While I was drinking, I did a lot of things that I would wake up and be ashamed of, and and this got worse. This wanting to isolate got worse as I had more and more shame. Cannot seem to hang on to the good things in my life. Feel unworthy. So this is where I'd get opportunities. I'd work really hard to put myself in a position, and then all the while I feel like I didn't deserve it, and that would constantly gnaw at me, and eventually I would ruin it. Cannot stop regretting the past. So this is another thing, keep you up at night. Just in my head, beating myself up. So these are the kinds of ways my life was unmanageable, and it was these things that caused me to seek the solution through alcohol until it stopped working for me, until it turned on me. And so that's step 1. Let's see what to do next. So the next thing you want to do is discuss your list with a sponsor. So if you don't have a sponsor already, if you've done those first 3 steps, now's the time to get one. And I would be happy to help you temporarily. If you send me an email, we can schedule a phone call, and I'll be happy to discuss the readings with you and listen to your lists. However, it's important that you hear, just so you don't want to do this like via email. There needs to be like a connection with a person, and it's better if the person is there and you can look in their eyes, they can see you eyeball to eyeball. But if that's not possible, the telephone isn't the bad way to go. So I'd be happy to take your call. But the main thing is, I think it's really important to have a sponsor where you're at. Now, if you've been sober, like for a long time, I don't know, depends on your situation, really. Some of us need a lot more supervision than others. But if you're new, like less than 10 years sober, I think you're going to be better off with somebody who you can see at a meeting. All right, but temporarily, I'd be happy to help you. Discuss the reading and the list with your sponsor, and then move on to step 2. So that's all I have for step 1. I'm going to put an email in the description if you want to get a hold of me. Like I said, I've been sober nearly 15 years. And the reason I'm making this is because I want to try to help some people work the steps. I didn't put my name on this. It says anonymous. If we talk, I may or may not tell you my name. So I'm not doing this to like get any prestige. I'm not going to make any money off of this. My goal is just to help you work the steps. So I'm going to put this up and see if it gets a response, and if it does, then I'll put the next one up. So. And by the way, I have a sponsor as well, and I'm a member of a home group. So all the things that I'm saying a person to do in this presentation, I'm doing myself. Okay, and I would never tell somebody to do something that I'm not currently doing, unless it's something that I don't have experience with, that I send I'd send somebody I sponsor to talk to somebody who has that experience, and then I would tell them to do whatever that person told them to do. So, like I said, this is an experience-based program. We don't give each other advice, none of that. Share our experience, and then go on from there. So, at any rate, I hope this is helpful. I'd be glad to hear from you. Discuss anything that you'd like to with respect to alcoholism and recovery. So, take care.